It started way back in 2011. I was on downwind at the Long Beach airport with a student, so instructing, and he was learning the traffic patterns and landings, and out of nowhere, we just couldn't hear anything from the tower. The radios went dead. We were checking all of our side. Everything seemed fine. And I looked over at the tower and they were shining a green light at me. And so it's like, hey, green light, let's land. Something's wrong. So we land. And then I started thinking, in that slightly increased pressure situation, if I got a flashing light, if I'd got something different, would I have remembered immediately what that meant from the light gun signals? So I made a quick reference card, put it on my knee board of all the different light signals. So, and then I started thinking, maybe I can build off this and build a little reference card of stuff that's hard to remember, critical information or stuff you just don't use often. And so I built a little reference card about 5 by 6, a little bigger than that, and made a VFR side and an IFR side. It had a bunch of information on both sides. And to back up a little again, the name I came up for the reference card was the Backseat Pilot. It was supposed to be your little helper in the back seat or on your knee board or in your bag. When you ran into something you forgot or wasn't sure about, you pull it out and it's your helper.
Hi everyone, I'm Annalisa from C.A.C. Global Solutions. I'm here with Brett for another episode of our podcast, Aviation Perspectives with C.A.C. And today, Brett and I are going to talk to Nate Ehlers. He's a certified flight instructor, founder of Backseat Pilot, and he's also a United Airline pilot and a pilot of the C-17 for the Air Force Reserve. Nate, thank you so much for your time. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
What a career. Wow.
It's been a bit of a whirlwind, not entirely as planned, but very happy with the way it worked out in the end.
Okay. Well, we have lots of questions for you. So I would like to start with the first one. How did you start in aviation and how your career evolved?
Absolutely. I was one of the ones who kind of got the bug at the young age. My mom says third grade was when I made the decision to become a pilot. So definitely knew I wanted to fly. And I think a lot of that came from a grandfather who was a B-29 flight engineer in World War II. So seeing he had a scrapbook and pictures and stories from that time. And then I remember seeing the Blue Angels as a kid. And then, another strong memory is not directly related to airplanes, but seeing the rocket launch, the space shuttle launch from pretty far away. Couldn't get too close, but I remember being in Florida and seeing one of those as a kid. And I think those all came together and kind of got the bug for aviation for me. But I knew I wanted to fly, ended up applying for colleges and went and got a business degree. The parents, had some good advice to get a degree I could fall back on, seeing as I had never flown in my life. And, as much as I said I wanted to, you don't really know till you do it. But I got the private rating in college, loved it, turned down an internship or the full-time job after an internship and went the civilian route. Not having anyone in the family really who had flown for the airlines or, had that experience or flown commercially, I didn't know what my next steps were or what direction I wanted to go. So when I came out of school, I had a connection to a friend of a friend who knew a part owner of a flight school out in Georgia. So I went out there, went the civilian way, got my CFI, loved the training, and then I moved back to California and started instructing there. So just started the whole civilian way off the bat. Got the CFI, did a few years there, had an amazing time. It was a great job, great company, learned so much. But then kind of halfway through there, once you get more immersed into the aviation industry, you start seeing the different options. And I had a couple friends from college and a couple guys I knew in high school who'd gone the military path and were flying there. And then I started learning more about guys I trained, as a CFI who had flown in the military. And I thought, maybe this is the way for me. This sounds like something I really want to be part of and get involved with something bigger than yourself and be a part of that style of flying. So to kind of keep a long story relatively short, I started looking while I was a CFI into the military side, went to an Air Force recruiter, mid-20s, said, too old, this will never work, can't make it. So that door closed in my face really fast. Started talking to a few other recruiters, Marines, Army, looking at every avenue I could. ran into some headaches with the recruiters and showing up to places, the lights off, doors closed at 4:30 in the morning, and just a lot of roadblocks.
Mm.
But at the same time, I applied to a regional airline, got the regional job, moved out to Chicago. That's where they based me, and that opened up more doors. You start meeting more people involved in aviation and who've done different paths. So got some good advice, found a good recruiter. That got the ball rolling for the military side. And now to tie it all back together, the Air Force active duty, saying I was too old, was kind of a heartbreaker. But then that led to finding out about the Guard and Reserve and how that all worked. And so I kept my civilian airline job, the regional job, applied to the reserve, and got a spot flying C-17s at McGuire. So it ended up being the best of both worlds, where I kept the civilian job, went on military leave, did the Air Force stuff for about 5 years, and then started splitting time between the two. And so over the years, I flew a bunch of C-17, got to go all over the world, see all kinds of stuff, do things you never thought I'd ever do. The see the world was legitimate. It really happened. And then progressed through there, got my aircraft commander rating, ended up getting the United job, and then becoming a C-17 instructor for the squadron as well. And then I just separated from the Air Force about 2 months ago. So
Okay.
getting a little more time back. But
Yeah.
quite a whirlwind of a path, a lot of different things. Didn't know which way I was going, kind of just went through the doors as they opened and ended up getting to do a little bit of everything.
Very interesting career. I'm quite impressed, and for us, it's I think the first time. Well, the podcast is fairly new, so I think this is the first time that we have somebody like you on the podcast, and I like that you have this civil and military perspective to offer. So you have been into the training world for a while. So what do you think it's the difference between a civilian training and a military training, what they can teach one another, or they can't teach anything to one another?
Yeah, absolutely. And they definitely can. There are a lot of similarities and then a lot of differences. And I think
Mhm.
the primary differences just come down to like the core of what each one is. On the civilian side, you got the path to the airline, you're paying to go to that school to get the instruction,
Mhm.
versus on the Air Force side, you've gone through a rigorous process, you've been selected, and they are paying you to be there. So there's definitely a different mentality in those situations where, hey, we're paying you, you're going to do exactly what we say, you're going to do it exactly how we say it, and you will be here exactly when we say to. Versus the
Yeah.
civilian, you get more flexibility. So big picture, and then the missions are, of course, different. So big picture, that's where they kind of differ. Going to the training itself, there's a ton that is very similar, if not the same. Flying an airplane, most planes for the most part fly the same, big picture. It's when you drill down to the type of training. So the Air Force and the CF, well, I'll back up a little. Having the CFI and having been to the airlines and having that experience of flying definitely made the Air Force training a lot easier, because I came
Mm.
in with a ton of experience. I knew how to fly versus the guys who were coming right out of the academy were brand new to aviation and just kind of getting their feet under themselves on how to fly a plane and jumping right into a turboprop. So having that experience, took a weight off my shoulder there. And then my job was more to learn the Air Force style of flying. And that's
Mm.
where the military style is different. So the traffic pattern was different. The rules are probably 90% the same when you look at the VFR, IFR rules and that stuff, and the flying very similar. But the Air Force was more structured, more, what's the right word? Um, Not stressful, but they would intentionally use training tactics. Like we'd have to do something called stand up,
Mm.
where they'd put a person in front of the class, you'd stand up there at attention, and they'd give you a scenario. And they say, here's
Mm.
a scenario, you're upside down, you're in a loop, you're upside down, you get a red light. What do you do? And you've got to talk through it under pressure, everyone watching, standing up. And if you get it wrong, you're not flying that day. If you get it right, you just keep going, they make a mark. So a lot of training similarities in that scenario-based training and the way it's run, but a little more intense, I'd say, on the Air Force
Mhm.
side. which can be good. That stuff is still ingrained in my head. I can remember exactly what we had to say. I can recite it verbatim still and be ready to go. So yeah, there are definitely techniques, procedures, mentalities that you can take from both, and I think bring together to just make training better. I talked to another flight school recently who they like to kind of do a group thing. It's a career path flight school down in Texas, and they have kind of the hangar set up so everyone can come in all the time and hang out and talk and learn about flying and bounce ideas off each other and help each other get better. And the Air Force very much had that mentality as well. We had a class of about 30 and we were split into 2 flights, and the idea was everyone is competing against each other for the highest scores, and then the top scores get the top pick of what they fly. So although everyone's competing, it was made very well known that you will help each other out. You're here as a team. You will grow as a team. You'll work together. And that was part of your score too. So even though if you had the best flight scores, but you were a bad wingman, you wouldn't get the top rank. The commander would pull you down. So a lot of similarities in working together, building each other up, helping each other out, and then techniques for scenario-based training and how to learn the airplane better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. There are a couple of things that I take from this, and well, I'm just a private pilot, like the Sunday pilot, so I'm not that experienced. But I remember during my training, at the beginning of my training, I wasn't very organized, so I would check this and that and this and that and this and that, and my flight instructor said, "No, from the left to the right, you check in this way." And this is something that it remained in my mind. Even today, when I do something, I have all my things, like I prepare a cake, I have all my ingredients from left to right, and I have all organized. And I like also the fact that you were saying there is this open hangar, and you go and you bounce ideas off of each other. And this is something that we are trying to do with the podcast now. Thanks to technology, we can do that. We can upload the video on YouTube, and we can share our ideas, our experience, and grow the aviation industry at large together.
Right. I find it interesting, the concept of more or less like cohorts within the Air Force, right? Whereas I suspect in industry it's much less like that. It's more individually competitive. And but the question I have you seen different organizations in industry where it is kind of a cohort situation similar to what you saw in the Air Force?
I think throughout the Air Force, you see that in a similar way. Outside of just pilots, the Air Force tries to bring that mentality of, the team idea. Obviously, I haven't been through that training. But outside of this, the last real corporate experience I had was an internship in college. So I jumped out of the cubicle life, and I couldn't see myself sitting there. But in that job, that was a big company. Great job. And being the intern, you're kind of, you're there portions of the year, not really involved in everything, and probably a little annoying because you're like, "Hey, what can I do?" And they're like, "You don't know what's going on at all. You're still, you're just a college kid who shows up for a few months." So I know it exists out there. I don't think I have any specific examples off the top of my head, but generally from what I hear from a lot of people in that industry it is very individual and, at times cutthroat. So
right. Well, I'm kind of thinking like along the lines of the airlines, for instance.
Oh yeah.
I can't fathom a regional carrier or even a major carrier having that same camaraderie and cohort kind of mentality as would be required and actually required of your presence in the military.
Correct. No, I haven't seen it at all to the same level as the military. The military really drills that in of you will work as a team. And a lot of that was structured in the beginning. When you show up day one, it was 6 a.m. and I think we walked in 30 seconds early as a group. And man, it was, you are here at 5:59 and 30 seconds. I said 6 a.m. You will be here at 6 a.m. So you showed up early, you'd wait out. They set the stage quickly and early. And then it was 12-hour days to start. So you were in the squadron, in the flight, 12-hour days. If you weren't flying, you were studying, you were working with everyone, you could get food. And you had to work together to kind of get freedom back and prove that you were progressing as a class and progressing as a group and getting higher scores. And then once you met goals you set as a class, then the freedoms would open up a little more. You get more free time. If you weren't flying, you didn't have to be in there for 12 hours. And it grew from there to where we got more freedom and became more independent. Versus, again, that airline mentality, it is much more of a business. So it's got to be efficient. They do encourage you to work together, absolutely. And it does help a ton because, studying with people and getting the different perspectives and just working on call outs and progressing through the systems and all is hugely, very, very difficult on your own. So they do encourage it, but they don't have the structure, and it would be incredibly expensive to set up something like the Air Force does. So yeah, you do get those trade-offs where it's not forced, but it is definitely encouraged and very helpful.
So this is very much related to the next question that we have. So how each experience prepared you differently? The civil, the general aviation, the airline, the flight instructor role. What I hear a lot from the military is this kind of discipline that, if you will, makes things efficient, which is good for the airline, but also the fact that you have to be able to work with different people in the cockpit because you don't fly always with the same co-pilot or captain, right?
Right. Yeah. So, and that's true across the board. And what's been nice about the reserve is it's a very consistent group of people, and you fly with the same people pretty often, versus the active duty, they kind of more control your career. So every 3 years, people are coming in and out, constantly shuffling, where the reserve is very consistent in that way. Once you're in a squadron with the reserve, it's kind of up to you and them if and when you leave. So in that sense, you get to fly with a lot of the same people. Then I took a deployment back in 2017, and now, it's a whole new squadron, a whole new group of people, C-17 pilots from all the different bases, active duty and reserve, coming together. And then you're shuffling between the different crews. So you're flying with all kinds of different people. And that does build that ability to interact with different people, fly the same procedures with different pilots. And then, it helps absolutely with the airline because you've already been through all this. You're maybe fly one trip with the same captain or first officer and then start shuffling things up. It's always changing.
Yeah. I find this very interesting because in some way it's something that we also experience. We are an aircraft management company. We manage different aircraft, fixed wing and rotary wing, under different aviation rules. And for example, one experience that we have is for helicopter offshore on the offshore operations on yachts. And, very often we try to push the idea to have your pilot and your maintenance engineer that are two fixed entity, if you will, because they get to know the machine and the operation extremely well because they are involved 24 hours a day. And that is very valuable. But at the same time, dealing with different people, it also opens your mind. So it's a little bit of a...
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, you learn a lot. You see a lot of different things, talk to different personalities, different opinions. It's great. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Even learning the equipment. I mean, I've been in corporate environments where you get the same people flying the same airplane all the time, and then all of a sudden you introduce a different set of pilots, and the airplane's not the same airplane. It's a piece of garbage because it's got all kinds of faults that the first crew was just living with, right? So mixing it up like that has value as well as the consistency of having the same crew all the time, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I would like to link all of your experience a little bit with a couple of questions in relation to what we do, aircraft management. So from a pilot perspective, general aviation, airline, military, what is your experience with airworthiness and maintenance? How do you deal with them? Do you deal with them at all?
Yeah, definitely. Air Force and airlines are a little different, but a lot of similarities, and then different procedures, processes, and kind of techniques on how to do things. With the Air Force, yet before every flight, we'd get a call from or talk to command post who'd relay the maintenance status of the aircraft and say, hey, it's, these are the write-ups current, it's mission capable partly, or, it's not mission capable at the time and they're working on something. And then we'd start our briefs, get ready on our end in the squadron, and then head out to the jet, and maintenance would always be there. There'd be a team of guys out there, usually 3 to 5, depending on the situation. And we'd run through the maintenance log books. We'd look for, just kind of verifying. We got to do our checks as well. Trust but verify, they say. So make sure the inspections are done, go through all the write-ups and make sure there's nothing we're not aware of, or that, doesn't affect us differently than they'd assume. There are times when it doesn't look like a big deal on their end, but it is on our end, or vice versa. And so making sure, we know what's wrong with the plane and we're all on the same page there. So we go through it, then we start the pre-flight checks, getting through those. If we had an issue, maintenance is waiting on the aircraft. So we just say, hey, we keep getting this warning or this annunciation, it's not going away, or this isn't working. And they'd either fix it themselves or call whatever specialist in they needed to fix it. So yeah, great, always on hand, very helpful. And then post-flight, we'd always debrief with them. So we'd take the maintenance logs, anything we wrote up, we'd put in there. We'd go back to maintenance before we went back to the squadron, talk to them. They have a little form we fill out about everything we did, if they've got anything they need to do. Sometimes we'd, for example, fly low levels over the ocean, and salt water down low, they like to know if you were down there because that triggers something on their end. Debrief with them, let them know what issues we had, if any, and then they'd take care of the rest and take care of the jet. Additionally, on missions to more places without maintenance, more obscure locations, we'd bring a flying crew chief with us. So we'd kind of have a crew member who was a maintenance guy, and he'd bring his tool set. He was kind of a jack of all trades. And these guys were awesome. So you'd end up in Africa or the Middle East and something would break and it'd be like, hey, we don't want to stay the night. So they'd take care of whatever issues, figure out what had to be done to get it fixed, at least to get it back to, somewhere like Europe or something. And then we can get a maintenance crew in, or, they have maintenance on the base there and we can take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that compared to the airline, where now if you get a write-up, lot simpler process, a lot less interaction unless something's actually, there's an issue. Basically, if there's an issue, we catch it, put it in the logbook, and give maintenance a call on the radio and say, hey, we just wrote up XYZ. And they say, we'll be right out. And usually within minutes, they're there, they're fixing it, taken care of. They send the logbook right back. They update the logbook. So very different process, procedure, and, just mentality, structure of everything.
Yeah.
But same idea.
So this fascinates me because, you're talking about the operation from an operational perspective, but I just want to come back to the flight instructor aspect of it for a minute, because this is an area that it has always interested me. I've been principal inspector with Transport Canada for different flight schools, and one of the things I was always curious about is the training that the flight instructors instill on the trainees in regard to recording of defects, how to tell whether an aircraft's serviceable, what a maintenance release actually looks like. Are these all aspects of like a CFI program, or instilling in the CFIs what they should be instilling in their trainees?
It should be. I hope so.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
that's why
and
I
that's
asked.
yeah, I focus more on the airline and Air Force side, but going back to the instruction side, airworthiness is a big deal. Generally, the MELs don't exist on the flight instruction side. It's the FARs. You're looking at I'm pretty sure it's 91-205, the kinds of equipment list, the airworthiness directives, that kind of stuff, putting that all together to make sure everything you need is on the plane. And that should get instilled in the private pilot level, making sure the CFI is relaying that. And generally, if it doesn't, that gets caught pretty quick, I think, on a check ride, because the examiner is going to want to see the aircraft logs, that the required inspections are done, that the equipment's on the aircraft. And, if you don't have the logs and can't show the AERO acronym for inspections, it's gonna end a check ride very quickly, I think. So yeah, it should, and I think it pretty much often does get built in there. How often things get written up and taken care of versus kind of like you were talking about earlier, lived with, that might be different as younger pilots, especially when you're flying the plane once and you're new to this, and there's some hesitancy and uncertainty as to, is this really a problem? Do I need to write it up? Do I not write it up? Yeah, but it definitely should be, and that kind of foundation is so important to the future of everything. If you can establish that risk management, scenario-based training, and airworthiness, safety mentality, it's so valuable going forward.
Yeah. One of the reasons why we ask this question, not only because it's part of our business, our activity, and our aviation training, but also we went through your website, Backseat Pilot, and we saw that you have some brochures that you can download, and one was about airworthiness and MEL. So we were interested in knowing your take, also because as again the private Sunday pilot, I had an experience myself where I went flying with other two friends, and there were one besides and one in the back. And at that time, I didn't have a lot of experience. So when I went to do the flare, I pull up too much without understanding the weight of the machine, and I hard landing. And the maintenance manager saw me, and I went there and I told him, this happened. If you give me the book, I'll write it up. And he said, no, don't worry, we're going to do the checks tomorrow. But there are a number of things about it. First of all, it's the regulation that you have to write the discrepancies, but also for a flight school or for an organization, how do you manage the financial part of a hard landing inspection if there is no hard landing inspection in the book. This is one of it, but also it is important for even minor aspects for a pilot, a young pilot, to understand, is this a problem? This is not. This is why, in my opinion, they should always report what they see, what they experience, because they are learning what is a defect and what is not.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a new environment and new world of how things work, and you're getting the fire hose of knowledge, the information, trying to soak it all in, and then you're still, it's very difficult to figure out. You're learning by doing. You're figuring out what is safe and unsafe kind of by doing. So yeah, having that flight instructor around who can tell you, like, yes, we write everything up, take it to maintenance. If you're not sure, ask a CFI, ask the owner, ask maintenance. Get problems fixed. Right. Don't leave it to the next guy, because that's just asking for trouble and more work for them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and you're potentially giving somebody an unsafe aircraft as well, right? So
yeah.
You touched on something briefly, that was the risk assessments in the military. And I'm just curious, flight risk assessment tools, is that something that you focus on in the CFI training?
Yeah, so those are included in the CFI. So going back to Backseat Pilot, I've mostly got, the current setup is a set of products made to make the path to CFI easier, smoother. I don't want to say easy, because CFI is not easy and it shouldn't be, but it makes the path a little easier. Everyone's got to prepare a set of lessons based on the ACS or PTS if you're doing the instrument instructor, and be able to be ready to present those to the examiner during their CFI check ride. And then teach from them, going forward once you're a CFI. And so there's a lesson in there for each task of the ACS. And there are a couple tasks in there that touch on risk management. Section 1 is the fundamentals of instruction. And there are 2 chapters in the Aviation Instructor's Handbook. I think it's chapter 2 and 10 that are very focused on risk management. And then I've also incorporated an extra lesson in the appendix as well, that covers the additional risk management. That is a result of, I think over the years, the studies, the NTSB reports, everything has come back to realize that risk management and threat and error management, scenario-based training, all are incredibly valuable and get close to, if not at, the root cause of a lot of accidents. And having those tools and those mentalities go a long way in preventing these accidents or getting ahead of them so they don't even get close to occurring. So yeah, there are a couple lessons in there, and it is getting more and more higher and higher priority, taught more often and earlier. And I think it's just getting a lot more attention, which is great.
Yeah, one of the reasons I ask, I'm just curious. I mean, it sounds like the military, that's fully embraced. Mission risk assessments before you go out on any mission. It sounds like a standard. With the commercial side, I'm presuming that all missions are assessed to some degree prior to flight, serviceability of the aircraft even. Now, I mean that ultimately that rests with the captain, right? So the pilot in command. But when we deal also with ferry flight operations and such, and what we see is there's a little bit of a mix throughout, if you might say, on what people will consider an appropriate risk assessment. Is this something you find as well? Or, I mean, obviously, in my mind, the risk assessment military, you would see in military is not what you would see in commercial aviation. Is that right?
Right. Somewhat similar. Again, it's like everything's kind of like 80-90% similar, and then you get the differences based on the type of flying and the structure of the industry and organization. So on the Air Force side, yeah, we'd have a risk assessment. Oh, I'm forgetting the name of the worksheet we did, but it basically take you through every phase of flight and everything you're doing, and you'd rank it. You'd give it a score: high, medium, low risk, and then the score would add up at the bottom. And if it was overall low, good to go. If it was medium, you needed to sign off from the squadron. If it was a high risk, then it had to be signed off from higher up. So yeah, you just kind of look at everything you were doing, time of day or night you were leaving, type of operation, if you're air refueling at night, low levels, if you're in austere places, pretty much everything you can think of, go through there. How you're feeling? Did you sleep? Are you on the backside of a time zone or other side of the world trying to fly in a weird time? All that stuff, and then you'd add them all up and get the approval you needed. Or if it was too high, they just say, "Hey guys, we're not doing this today." If it's a training mission and it's getting high risk on a training sortie, probably just going to scrap it. There's no reason for that. Versus the airline, it is set up a little differently, and United does a great job of teaching this stuff. We've got a class, I think it's every other year right now, where they really go over it. And I believe United established this threat and error management process a handful of years ago. The idea is before every flight, we meet in the crew chief pilot's office area. There's a crew area, tables. You meet the person you're flying with, you go through the flight plan, you see everything there. Any issues, talk about it, talk about threats. And then when you get on the plane, before you do your briefing, you go through threats. And the idea is we find potential threats in the flight, whether threats with you, with the airplane, with the environment, and we get ahead of them there rather than waiting till you experience them and then be like, oh, we need to fix the problem now. So get ahead of the threats early, brief them, how we're going to handle them, and then that should prevent the errors. And then we continue through the flight, and then post-flight, we go back and debrief and say, hey, these were the threats and this stuff popped up. And then they've got a handful of risk management, what's the best word? Kind of tools you can use, whether, let's see if I can remember off the top of my head, automation management, communication, leadership, stuff like that, of all these tools of how did we handle the potential threats and errors. How could we have? What went well? What could we have done better? And so to kind of tie that all together with the training side, I've tried to take all those principles and techniques from the Air Force and the airlines and bring them into the CFI lessons I've created, and then establish them also in the syllabi I've built off the CFI lessons. So the idea is you grab the CFI lessons, you edit them to get ready for your CFI check ride. So they're yours. They're tailored to your style, your teaching, whatever you want to include, not include. And then when you're done, you can use the syllabi, which are tied to the lessons. So you've already got these edited lessons. Now you got a syllabi that applies those to teaching a private instrument, commercial, et cetera, student. And so what I've done on each of the flights is put a section in the pre-flight that says, hey, we're going to discuss the threats, and using the PAVE acronym, which is more common in the aviation instructor's handbook and on the GA side. So it's looking at the pilot, any issues there, using the I'm safe checklist, if you're familiar with that, but just anything wrong on your side, the aircraft for A, the environment, ENV for V, and then external factors. So it's just saying before every flight, let's not just jump in and hard charge. Let's take a look at what the potential threats are, how they can affect this flight, and then let's try to mitigate them. So what can we do to either bring the threat down or just eliminate it entirely, which, can go as far as canceling the flight or changing a route, or changing the destination, whatever works.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's been my experience, even just knowing the potential threat exists is you're ahead of the game, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Nate, do you have other 47 hours? Because I have a number of questions for you.
Yeah, absolutely. We got time.
I had just a few questions, and then we're going to talk about Backseat Pilot. So all these, I suspect more in the military, obviously, that sometimes you do have to do what you need to do. You have to go to a mission, even though the evaluation of the risk is medium high. Is that something that can happen? And if that happens, obviously, I suppose you guys try to put mitigations in place.
Yeah, absolutely. There are ALRs, acceptable levels of risk, that come down from high up based on the situation to where the overall mission will be allowed or not allowed, just, black and white based on that acceptable level of risk. So when I was deployed in the Middle East and we were flying those missions, I want to say medium was our ALR. I don't remember for sure. The idea being you're in a combat zone, there are threats, but everything we're doing right now in 2017 it's not as critical as it was, 10, 15 years earlier. So we're not going to send you into these high risk situations with a C-17. It's not worth losing the airplane, whatever's on it, whoever's on it. So they limited the risk based on what needed to be done. And so, yeah, there are, in a sense, levels of risk management to where the high ups say, medium's the limit. You're not going above it unless there's something big going on, and then you'll get another high up sign off. And then you do the risk management as well on your end and do a high, medium, low and kind of assess it that way. But yeah, if you are going somewhere that the risk is high, you do what you can to get it as low as possible and still accomplish the mission as effectively as possible.
Yeah. I came up with this question because to me, this is very similar to helicopters operation in the bush, something in an extreme area where, there is a lot of talking about SMS and safety, but sometimes people do what they need to do because they don't have a choice. But this is another thing for another episode. I'm curious though, you talked also about risk management for the airline, and you come up maybe after a mission, this happened that you didn't consider. So all of these mitigations, evaluations, are they recorded so that also other crews can look at them and learn?
No, they're not. I mean, with the number of flights these airlines do daily, it'd be thousands and thousands of these recorded. So they're just a discussion between the captain and the first officer pre and post flight of how did our flight go? What can we do to make it better? And then when we go to training, I believe it's every other year now. They're doing a expanded training where, usually we have to go every 9 months, and you go to the sim and you do a line-oriented evaluation where it's similar to a flight from point A to point B, and stuff goes wrong and you got to handle it with the captain, versus the next time you go out there, you're doing a maneuvers validation where you're doing the emergency procedures, engine failures, that kind of stuff. And then you flip-flop every 9 months. And I believe now every other 9-month period, they're adding in a full day of class where talk about trends they're seeing, talk about threat and air management, really focus on how important safety is and how on top of this you have to be. Because I remember this in INDOC with the airline, is they stressed we can't be 99.99% perfect, because with 4,000 flights a day, it's still a big problem. So it's got to be 99.9999, nines as far as you can see. It's got to be so safe. And so they really do stress like how critical the threat and error management is, working together as a crew, making sure things are done right and following the standards, operating procedures, just getting things right.
Now I have a question that relates to this. So what do you think about this kind of push on a global scale to have zero accident within a certain amount of time? I don't know if they are talking about 2050 or something. Is that even possible? Your personal opinion?
I can't imagine it's possible, just because there's no way to entirely remove the risk. Even if you have these, you start thinking about computers and, maybe getting those to fly airplanes. And I don't, I'm not in that industry. I don't know how it works, but I was listening to a podcast the other day about, they were talking about machine learning, and it was more focused on the AI side of large language models and how those experience, what those are good at, and just how they break down outside of their bubble of large language models. And then looking at even self-driving cars and how much of advancement that has been, and how long it's taken to get, an object that can function on a 2-dimensional surface. And then they were talking about taking that to 3D and having a computer understand 3 dimensions was just, it sounds very, very difficult. So my very surface level knowledge says that sounds ambitious. I love it. I think it's a great target to set. I just don't know if it's possible. And especially when you look at the accident records, and what I think 80% of the accidents are human related in general. So to get it to zero, I think means you've got to get people out of the cockpit, which obviously these people don't like. So yeah, it's a tough situation.
Yeah, interesting. I read an article just recently about I forget where exactly it was. I think San Antonio, with driverless taxis, doing all kinds of crazy things like crossing the center line for no apparent reason and things of that nature. So I think we've got a long ways to go before taking pilots out of the cockpit.
Well, listen, I use a ChatGPT, and I have noticed just in the recent months that every time I think they do an update, I have to reteach him how to speak to me. It just does his own thing, which is just for me, just a waste of time. It's a big discussion. Maybe we'll keep it for another interview. But now let's get to Backseat Pilot. What it is, how did you come up with it, and what does it do?
Absolutely. Yeah. It started way back in 2011, and really with an entirely different mentality, mindset, or a plan, I guess, for lack of a better word. I was on downwind at the Long Beach airport with a student, so instructing, and he was learning the traffic patterns and landings, and out of nowhere, we just couldn't hear anything from the tower. The radios went dead. We were checking all of our side. Everything seemed fine. And I looked over at the tower, and they were shining a green light at me. And so it's like, hey, green light, let's land. something's wrong. So we land, come to find out the tower's radios died somehow. I don't know what happened, but they shined the green light. I knew what to do. And then I started thinking, in that slightly increased pressure situation, if I had got a flashing light, if I'd got something different, would I have remembered immediately what that meant from the light gun signals? So I made a quick reference card, put it on my knee board of all the different light signals. So, I don't remember the last time I had studied those, and just to have them on reference in case this happened again. And then I started thinking, maybe I can build off this and build a little reference card of stuff that's hard to remember, critical information or stuff you just don't use often. And so I built a little reference card about 5x6, a little bigger than that, and made a VFR side and an IFR side, and had a bunch of information on both sides. And the idea was I would try to sell that as a product and maybe make a little extra money every month to make the CFI income a little more stable. And so I put that out on a website, and then threw my CFI lesson plans that I had written for my CFI check right out there as well, thinking maybe they'll drive a little extra traffic and I can sell a couple more reference cards and eat a little better. Long story short, I quickly found out that there was demand for pre-written CFI lesson plans, and the reference card, although helpful, was not the primary product. And to back up a little again, the name I came up for the reference card was the Backseat Pilot. It was supposed to be your little helper in the back seat, or on your knee board, or in your bag. When you ran into something you forgot or wasn't sure about, you pull it out and it's your helper. And I've tried to apply that name to everything going forward, of just trying to be helpful, make piloting CFI a little easier. So found out the CFI lesson plans there was demand for them. People were interested. They were pretty detailed, well written, I thought, and started finding out those were the primary product. So over the years, I've been iterating off them, trying to make them better, clean them up, keep up with changes in regs, keep up with the transition from the PTS to the ACS. And the idea being, buy them once and you get updates for life. So you're set. And then over time, talking to people, you get feedback on the lessons, and hey, this looks like it's missing, or is this right? Can you fix that? And so I've iterated in that sense, and then also added on PowerPoints to supplement the teaching, added the syllabi, added ACS reviews, which I wrote while I was deployed out in 2017. Those, a lesson plan doesn't necessarily follow the structure of the ACS, where it lists each task you have to know for steep turns and each task you have to know for landings and everything else. They're not always in a logical order. So the lessons sometimes move those tasks around. Everything gets covered, but in a more logical order. But a lot of times people want to study a product that just follows the ACS or PTS and just check the boxes. This is what it says it need to know. I'm going to go right down the list. So that's where the ACS reviews come in. And then started working on trying to incorporate AI into this and helping. So you've got a little at-home helper, and that's still very, very new. But the whole idea has become making the path to CFI easier and then building from there.
So how do you feel about online training, like what you're talking about, and in-person training?
I think in-person is the best by far. In-person will always be the best, but I think online can establish a good foundation, which can make the in-person better, easier, smoother. So yeah, learning online, allows you to absorb at least a portion of the information, get ahead, start building the mental concepts you need to understand the information. So you're a little bit smarter when you go in person, which means that takes less time. You can ask more pertinent questions. You can build the knowledge faster. So I think they work together very well, but I do think in person is definitely the best.
Yeah, I noticed on your website that you offer different workshops. I'm not sure if you call them workshops, but it looks very much like they're kind of online workshops where looks like to me, you get together with different people that sign up for them, and you have class sessions. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. That is something we just started. It's only been a few months. A guy I've met through this, he reached out while I was running Backseat Pilot and just said, hey, he appreciates material. If there's ever a way to help, he'd be interested. And we started talking, and he's a assistant chief flight instructor. He's got his ATP. He was a KC-10 flight engineer, all kinds of great experience. So he's teaching that class. And the idea being, I got a lot of emails from students getting ready or about to dive into their CFI and not really knowing where to start or having a roadmap for the studying. Their instructor kind of said, here's the ACS, go on, do it. And they're just like, this is a mountain of knowledge and learning to teach. And I don't know, I'm just drowning in this material. So it got a lot of emails like that. So decided to try to start a course where we could at least provide some structure and, give them a roadmap, work on the fundamentals of instruction, how to teach in week 1, have them teach a ground lesson and let Marcus and the other students critique them in week 2, flight lesson in week 3, talk about pre and post flight briefings in week 4, and then do some mock check ride prep there as well. So it's been going well. Marcus is having a great time. He loves it. He's been doing great. The students seem to like it a lot, and it gives them that extra support they need. And so it's more focused on like the Part 61 schools where, they don't have the very structured syllabi and aren't necessarily holding the student's hand or walking them through the process. And that's not to say all Part 61 schools do that. I've been to some very, very good 61 schools, but that tends to be the majority of the students. And then the plan now is to start adding more classes, kind of I don't know what we're going to call it, but something like a class pass, where we're going to offer to start, I think, 3 classes a week, same time, same day, every week. One will be check ride prep. So sample DPE and FSDO questions that, Marcus will ask them, and they can start building their check ride, kind of like an interview prep, building their check ride answers. A CFII, an instrument instructor, and a multi-engine instructor class where we'll swap between the topics so you can focus on instrument and multi-engine specific stuff. And then just a generic office hours every week where if you're working on your lessons, if you got questions about anything, come talk to Marcus. He'll help you with the lesson planning, help you with concepts, whatever you need, really. And I think in my head, I think that's the most valuable one just because it opens the door to anything anyone needs. But I'm excited to keep trying these different classes and interacting with people to see what can make things better.
So your business, it's kind of evolved over time just by what you've discovered people ask for and need along the way. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it started with a reference card. I had no intention of selling lesson plans, didn't even know there'd be demand for that, and then found that. So went down that path and have iterated on those. And those really, it started growing a lot, I found, when I started interacting with the customers more. And it was 2021, I think, I rewrote, kind of just went through every section of the PTS then, I believe. Yeah, for the CFI. Went through every section and just started kind of cleaning up, rewriting, revamping the lessons. And I'd send out an email to everyone every month that said, hey, this is the stuff I updated. What do you want to see? Or, what aircraft are you flying? So I can put some systems lessons on that and get feedback from them. And then I've just kind of continued that process of monthly updates, send an email out, see what I get back through the month, make those updates, send them out, send an email, and repeat. And just kind of that same idea of just going through the open doors when I was figuring out what path I was going to take in aviation, the same thing here of, this seems to be what helps people. Let's try that. And then people are struggling with this. Let's see if we can help there. So very much iterating off people's responses, needs, and whatever can make life easier.
Yeah, I find it interesting because with what we've been doing with the podcast and some of our other business aspects, well, this podcast, helping people understand the different perspectives. There's so many different perspectives in aviation, and people come at it with different ideas, different backgrounds. It's so vast.
Oh, absolutely.
And for us, we find that there aren't a lot of places for aviation professionals to kind of collect and share knowledge and share these perspectives. So it's one of our offerings and one of the things we enjoy doing.
Coming back to your Backseat Pilot, so you were talking about AI, that you just introduced AI somehow. So what do you think is the role of AI in training? And how is it going to evolve?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I think in training, the path I see, and it's still so new, I feel like this is everything we talked about before, is I'll make something, put it out there and see what people want and how it works, and then just kind of follow that path. The path I see is supplementing instructors. Whereas right now, the initial product I built is still not out, not a real product yet, but the initial thing I built is it's an AI that knows the aviation instructor's handbook. So it references the most current version. You can ask it questions, what are the laws of learning, or explain risk management to me, or, my favorite question that I've used to work on it is, how do human behavior and risk management relate? Because it takes concepts from different parts of the book that aren't related directly in the book and make sure the AI can reference both of those and tie them together. And so the idea has been to, well, one, the fundamentals of instruction, the aviation instructor's handbook is the biggest chunk of new material for CFI. By that point, how to do steep turns and landings and the maneuvers, all that stuff, the regs, the rules, you're learning to teach all of them. So this is all the new stuff. So I wanted to start there and focus on that to, kind of see what's workable, and then tailor it in a way that you can ask questions, ask it to explain things, and then it'll give you kind of a check ride view at the end too. So when you ask it to explain or how human behavior and risk management relate, it talks about what human behavior is, what risk management is, how they tie together, and then says, if an examiner asks you this on a check ride, this would be a great answer. Here's a brief 3-sentence answer versus this would be a poor answer. So starting initially with basic understandings of the fundamentals of instruction and maybe some check ride exam help. And then I think I can build forward into the AI teaching lessons, basically, kind of taking you through sections of the fundamentals of instruction and the instructor's handbook, and just say, hey, we're going to focus on chapter 1 today. Let me know what questions you have. We're going to hit these topics, and then you can interact with it as you go. And then when you show up to your CFI class, whether it's ground school class or with your instructor, you've got a little bit of a foundation built. You've been through this stuff. It's not all totally new. So now you can really start applying it and internalizing it and going from just repeating the laws of learning are da-da-da-da-da to, oh, I understand what these are, and now I can start applying them. So just trying to give people a little bit of a head start, a little more of a foundation before you get in. And then secondly, they're learning to teach the lesson plans. So I want to be able to have it know the lesson plan, see the lesson plan, and then say, hey, this is how we're going to teach it. So section 1, you're going to teach this, this, and this. Let's go through those topics in the structure of the lesson. So there's a lot to figure out, a lot to see how it exactly works and what people do and don't want. Maybe these ideas are like my reference card again. I'm missing the big picture where sure it'll be helpful and people might use it, but there's a better use here. But that's the idea right now. Start there and just keep iterating and building and seeing what's useful.
So you build all of this by yourself? So
far, yeah. It's been months because I am not a computer engineer or anything like that. Yeah. So there's a lot of learning, listened to a lot of podcasts, read a few books, and then a lot of trial and error working with AI, because AIs are pretty good at coding. So it definitely took some trial and error of, let's try to build this and see where it goes, where I struggle, where it struggles, and okay, now let's build a structure and build this. And so yeah, a lot of trial and error, but I've done it so far all on my own, and it works, which is very exciting and very fun, and can hopefully start helping people.
Wow.
You bring up a good point that I feel at least is, for somebody that's a potential CFI to think that they're going to use AI to see what it takes and to put something together, throw something together that's going to help them. I mean, you're doing this, I'm guessing, pretty much full time and spending a lot of time and energy on developing it. So the average person is not going to do that, right? I mean, it's just way, way overwhelming for the outcome that they're going to get. Whereas you're helping numerous people and there's more reward for the risk for the effort that's being made. So you can afford to put all of that energy into it. And I think, if a potential CFI sees that and understands that, well, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. This person's already gone through all of this and put these pieces together for me. There's real value in that.
Yeah, that's the idea, is everybody reinventing the wheel for every CFI check ride it's exhausting, and it takes a long time. I mean, the lessons alone, I think I spent 2 months preparing for my check ride, and I'm spending money. I've got loans to go to flight school. I'm not making money. I'm not getting any closer to the CFI job, to the airline or charter or whatever I want to do. And if we can compress that timeline, remove those 2 months, I get my flight instructor job 2 months earlier. Potentially, you're making money 2 months earlier. You're 2 months more senior at an airline, and it hopefully that ball just keeps rolling and moving forward. Going back to what you said about putting all the work in, I think a lot of it goes back to helping people, like you mentioned earlier. When you get invested in this stuff, and aviation, is our passion. We all love it. We're all very invested in it. And if you can help other people achieve those goals and feel that passion and get excited and make help them achieve that same dream I had, it's awesome. It's great to be a part of.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's like listening to your father or grandparents because they already done certain things. So you can learn something from other people's experience. I like what you said about AI supporting this. Supporting the teaching, because I found myself when I was training for the pilot license, but also when I learn other things, I'm very focused on what I'm learning, and I might not see how two different aspects come together. And I like that AI can support that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully over time, bringing in new textbooks and all and giving it more information, it can really start to pull things together from a lot of different places versus just the Aviation Instructor's Handbook.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Nate, we have just a few questions for you. What do you think are the issues in aviation today, and your field in particular?
Issues in aviation. I think a lot of it goes back to the risk management right now. And that's why there's so much focus on it. Looking at the new ACS versus the PTS, they've got a risk management section in every single task. The airline is so focused on risk management that I think it's doing everything we can to get ahead of that, get ahead of the threats, fix the errors, recover if you get past that, and just, use standard operating procedures and risk management to be as safe as possible, because safety seems to be the biggest concern, or the biggest focus. It's always the biggest concern, but the biggest focus. And I think there are ways to instill that at the beginning of flight training that can last an entire career.
Right. So do you have any advice for young professionals, whether they want to get be a pilot into airline, or whether they want to be a flight instructor?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not an easy path, flight instructor especially. It's not just a walk in the park. You don't, once you have your private, you're like, oh, I'll do my instrument. Now maybe I'll do my multi-engine. And it's just, you do it. CFI is a lot of work. There's a lot that goes into it. The check ride is not easy because it shouldn't be. You're going to be kind of molding the generation of aviators coming up right behind you. So these examiners need to know, you know how to teach, you know your stuff, you're invested in this. It's not just, I guess I'll do my CFI. It's a real important step. So just, and it's definitely worth it. It's so great to be a part of that and teach new people and see the passion in them and help grow that passion in them and help them achieve their dreams and get to where they want to go. So yeah, stick with it, push through it. It's tough. You're going to teach lessons. They're going to come out terrible. It's going to be frustrating. I remember some with mine where I'd go through them. I thought I did really good. And my instructor was like, "What? Why did you even, like, none of that made sense." And you're like, oh my gosh. So you go back, you reiterate, you edit, you do it again, and you learn over time. It's a lot of learn by doing. It's generally not something that happens the first time or is easy, but it's worth it. And it's a lot of fun. And then from there, CFI tends to be the best resume builder for the airlines, for the regionals. They love to see that. They love the experience. You've taught people, you've worked with people, you know your stuff, you've invested, and you passed that check ride. But build the hours, enjoy the instructing while you have it. I mean, it's generally pretty quick, but it can be very fulfilling. It can be very fun. It can be monotonous a lot of days and tedious when you're just over and over in the pattern and flight after flight after flight. But looking back on it, it's such an important part of aviation and your career and getting to do, very unique things. Because the airline is seniority based, the mentality is to rush through instructing, get your instructor certificate, build your hours, get out. But there's something to be said to enjoy that. And then as you're going toward that airline, if that's your goal, every step is a bit better. When you get to the regional and you start flying the jets, and it's like a dream come true, and you build your time there, you get your captain spot. And then when you get to the majors, it's everything you've dreamed of. And it's a great job. It's a great career. You just got to push through the tough parts and keep following the dream, follow the open doors where you can, get the experience to build your resume. Hopefully that provides some good advice. I could talk on and on.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, I was thinking, teaching also prepares you even better for the airline, in my opinion, because again, every time you sit and you have to teach to a different person who has a different personality, different way of learning things. And the same thing is in an airline, in the cockpit, you may fly with someone that you don't know very well. And so you are more open to kind of, I don't want to say adjust yourself, but to try to understand the other person better. And also I like teaching because it's like you leave a little piece of yourself to another person. It's just a little piece of yourself continues, its own life. Now, just another question. If somebody wants to do the military career, what kind of advice do you have?
Yeah. Also an awesome career. I'm very, very glad I did it. It's definitely something you want to do. I've run into people who I think used it as a resume builder or were using it that way. And it's a lot of work. But to back up from that, I'll get back to that in a second. Yeah. The idea would be, if you want to get into that, if that's a passion of yours, find a good recruiter who will help you out, get the tests scheduled, help you where you need it, not do the work for you, of course, but that is hugely beneficial. When I was first trying to get into the Air Force, and the first recruiter just said, "You're too old, this will never work." That was that. I talked to another recruiter who said, "Yeah, send me your resume and I'll send it to the squadrons." And I had not done any of the Air Force tests, anything like that. So I sent him a civilian resume. I was like, I don't think this is how this works, but okay. And of course, I never heard back from anyone because I didn't have any of the prerequisites. Another recruiter I dealt with was just, I'd get all my paperwork done. I'd have it sent to them. I'd show up for a meeting and be like, "We don't have any of your paperwork." I'd be like, "No, I know you have. I know I sent it." And they go look for 15, 20 minutes, come back. "Oh yeah, we got it. Here it is. Okay. Let's go through it." Man, I did all this work. Or like I mentioned earlier, I was showing up to a medical exam. All I knew is I had to be in LA at 5 a.m. I didn't know where. I couldn't get a hold of the recruiter past 5 p.m. He wouldn't answer phone calls, emails, texts. I just drove out to LA, got there 4:45, 4:30, and went to the recruiter's office because I didn't know where else to go. Doors were locked, lights were off. I was told if we didn't meet this deadline, my package was out the window, wasn't going to have a shot. And so just frustration, I'm trying so hard. I want to be a part of this. I want to do it. And it wasn't until I found a recruiter who was, more or less on my side, wanted me to succeed, that it really got the ball rolling to where I said, hey, I want to do this. I know what I have to do. I'm going to put in the work. And man, he was great. He scheduled the tests as soon as I asked for them. And then we just took it one step at a time. Because at this point I was getting later in age. I was 28 when I was taking the tests, and the cutoff for the Air Force pilot training, you had to start by the time you were 30. So it's quite a process to get through everything. So I was like, hey, we'll just take it one test at a time. If it goes well, we'll do the next step. We'll do the next step. And he had my back the whole way. He gave me advice, these scores look good. Let's go to the next one. Take the next one. These scores are definitely competitive. Let's build your package. He would give me phone numbers. He'd give me squadrons to call. So having that help and someone who's not just kind of doing their job and you matter a little, it makes a big difference. And then from there, it is a process. It's definitely something you need to have a passion to be a part of, because it's a ton of work just to get the spot, active duty or reserve. And then you're going to basic, which is not just a walk in the park. Those first few weeks, there's a lot of yelling, a lot of exercise and all. And that's where I saw guys start to second guess their decision at the beginning. And these were pilots in the reserve and guard who were like, why do I have to do this? I don't want to be here. And you're like, man, this is like week 2 of your Air Force career. You got to push through this. So good recruiter, passionate for it, definitely something you want to be involved with, and then just keep pushing. I think that's the moral of everything here, is just keep following, keep pushing to get where you want to be. So hopefully that's not too long-winded.
No, that was a good answer. So do you think that we could potentially take the military mindset and way of operation and apply to civil aviation? Do you think if we do that, would civil aviation work better?
Yeah, I think there are parts you can take without people jumping and quitting your flight school because you made it a little too intense. The idea being kind of like the flight school in Texas I was talking about, where they set up an area, it's a career path there. Students are fully invested. They're not doing side jobs. They're fully invested in flying. So they're in the hangar helping each other get better and learning together. That is huge. I think that builds the camaraderie, builds knowledge, a support structure. It's great versus, studying on your own at home it's difficult. It's slow. It's much more work. The scenario-based training, I think a lighter version of that could be very useful in the civilian world. Whereas in the Air Force, they stand you up in front and you're at attention. You've got to recite some stuff and then take it through the situation, and they'll grill you if you get it wrong. If you go down a wrong path, they give you the emergency and you diagnose it incorrectly or do the wrong checklist, they're going to make sure you did, which is good. You learn quick that way. You don't make that mistake again. But I also think if you're paying for that training and you want to just learn to fly, that intensity might be a bit much. But still, using that scenario-based training where you say, hey, you're in a steep turn, the engine starts running rough, you have the aircraft, you're by yourself. Okay, what are you going to do? Let's walk through it. And, a little less intensely take them through, or let them walk through the situation, be a guiding hand to help them out and guide through that process. And then just the consistency of it too, that was a huge part of the Air Force. You're in it every day, flying every day. If you can apply that, people learn faster, they fly better sooner, that kind of stuff. So yeah, there are definitely parts you can take from every phase of training, bring them together to fit the group of people and the mentality and the goal. And I think really improve the quality of flying, the risk management assessment, the mentality, everything there.
One last question, and then I swear I'm gonna leave you going.
Okay.
Under a financial point of view, when I was doing my pilot license, there were a lot of people from Italy going to United States because that was cheaper. How is it the situation right now, financially speaking?
Yeah, it is definitely cheaper in the US than Europe, in that area.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of that instruction when I was in Long Beach, the flight school I was at. That was kind of their target market. Their owner was from Ireland, his wife was from Scotland, and they would bring people over from France, the UK, Belgium, Austria, all over. And they'd come out here to Southern California, out there to Southern California, learn to fly, save a ton of money, then go back home and convert their FAA ratings to the JAA ratings. And yeah, saved a ton. Obviously, things still aren't cheap out here. Career paths are still very expensive. And so it is tough. It's definitely something you want to be sure you want to do, because spending all that money and then being like, no, never mind, it's gonna take a minute to pay off. But yeah, definitely expensive,
sure.
and it doesn't seem to be going down, strangely enough.
Yeah, we'll see what the future holds. Nate, where people can find you? Backseat Pilot website, emails, contacts?
Yep. Yeah. Backseatpilot.com is the easiest. There's a contact form there. The email, info@backseatpilot.com or nate@backseatpilot.com. And then LinkedIn, Nathan Ehlers. But if you have questions about any of this, whether the airline side, the CFI side, the military side, please reach out. More than happy to help. Like we talked about earlier, helping people in this industry is why you kind of get into these positions and start businesses that revolve around it. Because if it wasn't something you were passionate about, it's not something you'd want to do. But yeah, feel free to reach out. I do have an article on the website. I think it's something along the lines of how to become a Guard or Reserve pilot. And it walks through the whole process there of the tests you have to take, the scoring, pilot training, which has changed quite a bit since I wrote that article. It's a very different process and still evolving. But that's for another time. So if you have questions there, check that out. But otherwise, yeah, reach out if you have anything, if I can help anywhere.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Nate. That was a great interview. I really enjoyed it. Lots of lessons to take from you with this amazing experience that you had.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful talking to you. Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.